Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the being known as the first entity. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also, if you could, recount your own interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. So, to begin, we'll start as always with general announcements. What is quickly being referred to as the perpetual tear in Snowdonia National Park is still somehow present. The atypical breach that was secured last week by our team remains suspended in mid-air with still no sign of any entity coming through. We have attempted to send unmanned drones through the breach, but sadly they are either being destroyed immediately on entering, or the two-way signal is unable to pass through. Our research teams attempted to get around this by simply attaching an actively recording video camera to a stick and simply pushing it through the hole. This was after both a digital camera and a wired camera had proven less than successful. Once the video camera had entered the breach, the researcher holding the other end of the stick felt something within the breach take hold of the camera. After a short interdimensional tug-of-war, the camera was retrieved. However, the tape that was inside of the camera had been removed by the other party, whoever they may be. When DNA analysis was done on the camera after its return, it was found that it was grabbed by a descendant of Homo floresiensis, though with enough genetic drift to imply 50,000 years of evolution. Whoever is on the other side seems in no great hurry to step through the breach, and it also does not seem happy to be observed, although it may not have any idea what a video camera even is. From the DNA analysis, we can surmise that what we're dealing with is a subsphere where Homo floresiensis somehow became the dominant hominid. This would mean that we can all, at least for now, breathe a sigh of relief, as when compared to the Fey, Eldritch and Abomination spheres, a world filled with hobbit-like people really isn't that threatening. We are, however, looking for hunters to accompany the research team on a manned mission through the breach, specifically to act as bodyguards. This will be an anthropology mission, with the first aim being to set up a forward base directly on the other side of the breach. If you are interested in being part of this landmark operation, please contact your local Order office. Luna, or the first entity, though this is most likely a misnomer, is theorized by some in the research community to be the very reason life exists on Earth to begin with. A gargantuan being that at one point, according to the theory, collided with the Earth, leaving behind only a single cell from its body. This cell began to consume basic compounds from the water it found itself in, and eventually, through mitosis, split into two cells, and over time, untold billions. These single cells developed and changed, becoming better suited to their new environment. As they did so, they increased in complexity, becoming multicellular and filling many different kinds of niches. Some took forms to take advantage of the energy released from the sun, becoming the first primitive plants, while some took forms to take advantage of those plants, and some took forms to take advantage of those herbivores. This continued for billions of years, until we reached today. If you put it together already, good job! I'd give you a gold star if I had any. For those slower among you, what I'm saying is that, according to this theory, all life on Earth, including you, descended from the cell left behind by that gigantic entity. That gigantic entity that is still rather close by, cosmologically speaking. Luna, or the Moon, is supposedly the entity that seeded all life on Earth, though now covered thankfully by a tremendous amount of debris from the early solar system, forming a sort of shell around it. Whether the theory is true or not is irrelevant in the grander scale of things, however, as Luna is definitely alive beneath the crust that it's entombed within, and has far more effect on us than just the tides. We don't know for sure, but Luna does exhibit many aspects of a being from the Eldritch sphere, passively, at least we think, influencing all people across the Earth to differing degrees. A good example of this influence can be seen in Lost Days, specifically during the many instances all people will go through where they believe it's one day but instead it's the day after. The victims of this effect enter a fugue state where they will go off to isolated locations to do seemingly random and unconnected activities. People have been observed swaying gently from side to side, creating seemingly random patterns with the soil on the ground beneath them, digging holes to what appears to be no end, and many more things besides. To make it worse, once a victim has been made aware of the missing time, their minds will reflexively create false memories, placing them where they otherwise would have been. This worrying set of circumstances is compounded by the fact that the memories of all who had seen them, and all those who would have saw them if the false memory were true, will also be altered at the same time the victim creates the new false memory. We actually only discovered this phenomena by chance due to hunters who were actively carrying linked MMBs at a time of mass memory alteration, the hunters then bringing it to our attention. While attempting to gather evidence of these events, we also found that other individuals will enter a far shorter fugue state, in which they will actively destroy or replace written and recorded evidence that conflicts with the false memories. We actually only know that these events are connected to Luna due to the two groups we'll be discussing next. Lunaism is a faith based around the entity we know as Luna, or the moon. The core tenet of the faith is the idea that we have been separated from our true self, and that when the entity awakens once more, we will be reabsorbed back into its perfection. There are two separate forms of the faith that can be broken down into the traditionalists and the reformists. The traditionalists see our separation from the entity as a mistake. They see the first cell that was separated from the entity as the last time we were even close to perfect. Their argument is that once the first cell split into two, conflict was birthed from the separation. The idea that all life is in competition with each other is horrific to them, as they believe that divinity should not feed on divinity. They argue that the very second there were two, there was competition for resources, but going further, they also believe that the only way to end all conflict is for us to become one with the entity that birthed us. The reformists, though still believing the moon is a sacred being, believe that the separation and flourishing of life was a tool for the eventual goal. That by consuming energy from the sun and converting inorganic material to organic material, in essence building up the amount of biomass from one cell to all life on Earth, we will be strengthening the entity once we are absorbed by it. They take this even further by wanting to spread life out amongst the stars so that when the entity awakens, it will have a galaxy's worth of life to consume instead of one planet. To this aim, the reformists have attracted, by mundane means or otherwise, many billionaires to their ranks that can and have funded their own private space programs. Though the reformists have by far the most money and influence of the two groups, their end goal is far off in the distant future, while the traditionalists are actively trying to awaken the entity. As you should be aware, belief creates power to differing extents. The traditionalists routinely conduct rituals that they fully believe will awake Luna. Due to this, organizations, including our own, actively hunt down traditionalists across the Earth. We don't know for sure if their actions directly contribute to the awakening, however, we simply can't take that risk. The other aspect that both reformists and traditionalists exhibit, which is far more measurably dangerous, is the power of influence. Both groups, on a night of a full moon, are able to enforce their wills upon others, and if their chosen victim's will is weaker than their own, their victim will begin to think like their attacker. This is less dramatic than it first sounds, as there is no visual effect to go along with this phenomena. It is undetectable and only becomes apparent weeks later when the victim will begin supporting the group the victimizer belonged to. What makes this more insidious is the fact that the victim will have no knowledge of the influence they're under, fully believing they came to these conclusions themselves. The victim will also most likely have no memory of the person who attacked their mind, with their meeting only being for just a brief moment. So, how do we stop them? Well, thankfully, at least with the reformists, as stated before, due to the fact that their plans are set to the far-off future, only passive surveillance is currently called for. However, with the traditionalists, more active steps have to be taken. Using MMBs to protect from their influence, we routinely send hunters, like yourselves, to infiltrate these groups to gather information. Once all that can be learned from a particular group has been, we move on to the cleanup stage, where kill teams are sent in to eradicate the cult. Frustratingly, traditionalist cults have a bad habit of splitting themselves into splinter cults once they've gotten to a certain size, and due to their influence ability, this happens rather regularly. This is why the first stage is so vital, as without the reconnaissance, we would have no way of knowing if we'd found each fragment of a particular cult. It quite literally only takes one cult member who has been with a cult long enough to gain their ability to restart an entire organization once again. Now, I realize the revelation of the moon being an entity that is napping before it devours us all seems like the more pressing concern between it and the cults. However, we simply have no way of doing anything about the entity itself. We have had close calls in the past. The American RRR's plan to nuke it springs to mind, which would have most likely just woken it up early. But keeping on top of the various cults intent on our destruction really is the most productive thing we can do. For the time being, Luna remains in a dormant state, and with many such entities, the best thing you can do is to not think about it, and instead focus on the problems you can solve. But that will be all for today. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom, thank you.